So it's the middle of the day and the lights are out on the new tank. And the reason why is I'm in the middle of a 2 to 3 day blackout due to dinos. Yes, the dreaded dinos. Oy. I was not expecting to have that with this new tank. I started this new tank with live rock, so I figured I'd have the biodiversity. There is no sand in this tank, so maybe that factors into the equation. I ran into this issue with my 187 gallon tank a few years ago. I tried a whole bunch of things. The corals were just so stressed out. That tank was started with dry rock. I decided to reboot that tank and use live rock along with live sand. And that tank has been flourishing ever since. This tank is only 7 months old, so I guess it's still going through some growing pains. Really what happened a couple of weeks ago is my nutrients bottomed out. As much as I tried not to have that happen, they did. The nitrates and the phosphates went down to zero for a couple of weeks. And what I did was I increased the feedings in the tank to try to combat that. So I fed the fish a lot more. I also have a few corals in this tank, some frags, and a couple of LPS colonies. So I added some coral food. Really upped the feedings a lot. And that's when I noticed the dinos. And that actually happened with the 187 gallon tank. That's when I noticed the dino outbreak, is when I started dosing amino acids and some other coral food. I don't know what that if there's any parallels there, if that's an indication, but maybe it's an instability. Maybe it was because I had zero nitrates and phosphates in this tank and I just started feeding a lot more to increase the nitrates and the phosphates, that something happened. There was an unbalanced impact and the dinos just took advantage of that and took over the tank. But it got really bad, so I had to do something, and the plan is to do a 2 to 3 day blackout, and I want to be able to do that because these dinos are photosynthetic. That'll certainly stop them from growing, but it will also cause them to go into the water column. I have a microscope, and I believe I ID'd the type of dinos that will go into the water column when the lights are out, which is key if you have a UV sterilizer, which I'll talk about in a minute. But anyway, what I wanted to do was I stopped overfeeding the fish and dosing the coral foods, and I started dosing nitrates and phosphates. I know you can increase the nitrates and phosphates by just feeding the fish a lot more, but I feel like I have more control by doing precise dosing. So at this point, my nitrates and phosphates are at levels that I'm happy with. My nitrates are between 5 to 10 parts per million, and the phosphates are around 0.1 parts per million. So let me go into the sump room and I will show you the main device that I'm going to use to attack these buggers. So this is an Aqua UV 57 watt UV sterilizer, and my hope in conjunction with the blackout is to be able to zap those guys. And I've got the pump in the skimmer compartment, the sump right here, as you can see. I've got a valve on it in case I decide to crank back on the flow, but right now it's probably pumping at about, 1,000 gallons per hour, which is the minimum that is required for this UV sterilizer to zap organisms like dinos. So I'll throttle it back even more if it doesn't seem to be working, because I've read that the dinos, if you're using UV sterilizer, that the lower the flow, the better. But I don't want to go below the manufacturer's recommendations right now. I'm just afraid about burning the bulb. Anyway, so I mentioned that the pump drawing the water is in the main skimmer compartment. The output for the UV is going into the couple of compartments downstream of that, into the baffle where I have the heater. So that should be good, right? You don't want to have the output going into the same compartment there you're drawing the input. You want to have it downstream. So I believe that's a good setup, a good solid setup in terms of the UV. So that is the plan of attack. What I also did was I siphoned out a lot of the dinos in the tank, Good thing is that this is a bare bottom tank, so it was very easy to get them off of the bottom part of the tank and the glass. I also siphoned them off of the rocks and blew them off with a turkey baster as well to get them into the water column to help the UV sterilizer along in its quest to zap all of them. So that is it. I will keep you folks updated, and I would love to hear your comments, so please chime in if you have any feedback or advice in terms of my battle with dinos. Well, that'll do it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I also want to remind you about my premium SPS frag store on ReefBum.com. I will leave a link in the video description below. I will also leave links from my equipment store. I do sell GHL, Royal Exclusiv, and Bellum equipment, as well as Reef, Octopus, calcium, and Kalk reactors. Many of these products I do use personally on my tanks. Until next time, be safe and be well. Later.
We'll be right back.